All right, good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well out there. I know. Good morning, Evelina. I think you're gonna joining me here in just a minute. Thanks everybody for tuning in. You're tuning in live, or you're tuning in later. Evelina, where are you? Let me see if I can find you. Oh, there you are. Great. And yeah, hope everybody's doing well on this spring day. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you, Evelina. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but for some reason it says that the host stopped the video, so I can't share my video.
All right. Let me do this. And then I didn't try to stop any video, so.
Oh.
There you are.
Right.
Yay! Hi, Evelina. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, I was just reflecting. It's my goodness, out here, here we are hanging out in Snoqualmie Valley, Snoqualmie territory. I'm looking outside to the south, and we had an incredibly warm, gorgeous day yesterday. It got, I think, like into the 70s here, maybe even 75, and like clouds were burning off, and it was blue sky, and we were out wandering around, and the dandelions were open, and the bees were coming in and eating the pollen from the dandelions, and we saw a bunch of baby salmon in the river when my son Orion and I were wandering around, and it was so great. And then, like, it's pretty mild overnight, but there's this big storm system that's supposed to blow in this weekend, and it might rain, it might snow tomorrow and the next day, which is just kind of unheard of here in the Pacific Northwest. To get snow in April is pretty unusual. So yeah, here, let me go ahead and start recording this. And yeah, so I can't help but wonder if this erratic nature of the weather is just like sort of a reflection of the erratic nature of everything we're experiencing in the world, right? It's like this chaotic world out there a little bit. But I will say I'm thankful that even with the chaos of weather and the news and everything else, that the flowers are still blooming, the bees are still pollinating, and the osprey are back to near where we live, just to the south of here, down on the Tolt River. This family of osprey have been coming for years and years and years to raise many osprey babies right, not too far from our house. So yeah, so that's what I'm thankful for this morning and just thinking about it. How's everything out in Colorado, Evelina?
Spring is here, but like you, we might be getting some snow next week. There's a cold front coming through, and we had one day that was very windy, and we're probably going to get another one of those, and then drop in temperatures into the teens apparently at night. So yeah, I'm hoping things will survive. And not here, but I've noticed a little lower in elevation, there's a lot of trees that are blooming, cherry trees, apricot trees, and yeah, they're blooming already. So hopefully they're not going to be affected too much by the frost. There's a lot of orchards here, and it's a big hub for organic growers and fruit production and vegetable production.
Yeah. Well, and do I remember correctly that you heard some frogs singing not that far from you? You heard and saw your first frogs of the season out there?
Yeah, we had a really nice warm week. And then all of a sudden it was just rainy, but kind of warm. And I was walking our dead end road here that ends in the wilderness area. And one of our neighbors has a really nice pond next to the river. And yeah, I couldn't believe it. It sounded like an amphitheater. They were singing up a storm. And it was really loud. Like I didn't need to enhance the video at all. And I posted it on our social media because it's just, I don't know. It was really early from what from what I've been hearing to hear the frogs waking up and singing. And yeah, it was really, really interesting. I went for about a half an hour and then I came back and they were dead silent. So
Yeah.
I was looking for some predators. Maybe somebody scared them off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that there's something really special about those frog choruses, and if you haven't ever actually heard them, like in person, it is an unreal experience when they get really loud. Like it can be overwhelming to our senses, but it's if you want to have a sense of like what the biosphere when it's all regenerated and rejuvenated and healthy is like, that's one of those things. It's like this booming sort of multi-tonal frog chorus that's just like resonating in your body, and it kind of it's like it goes out into the world around you. And I'm really lucky. Actually, one of my neighbors right across the way, Warren Moon, who lives across the street over there, he's executive director of Wilderness Learning School. Talk about rewilding, because that's our theme. Our theme is like rewilding the planet, right? Both at his previous house and at his house where he lives, he's dug a pond in both places and brought in frog eggs of native frog species and basically rejuvenated the frog populations in both places. So there is a healthy, though not probably as loud as what you experienced, Evelina, but a healthy frog population right across the way. And occasionally we get a little Pacific Coast frog that hops over to our place. And yesterday Orion and I were out checking in the backyard because we could hear one, but they're so little, they're so hard to see. There's just these amazing little frogs. So happy to have the frogs singing. And yeah, hi Matt. My buddy Matt's tuning in from California, good friend from the Night Turtle Dance community, this amazing rejuvenative, rewilded nature-based ceremonial group. If you're ever looking for that, they're the people to check out. So, well, I thought I'd do a little intro overview here, Evelina, and then we could just dive into a little bit more about Wild Cooperative. Does that sound good?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, I started this series. This is, I think, the third or maybe even the fourth part of this series. And, I try to do these video series on Fridays because I want people to have a place to show up and have access to free information and not that have everything we have access to in the world require like us to pay, something out of pocket. And also a chance for people to ask questions and connect and around different topics. And we've done some fun ones. Some of them have been very survival oriented, and some of them have been more food oriented or movement oriented. And but recently I've been trying to take a little bit of a bigger picture and look at this notion of like, what does it really look like for us to, really try and address the concept or the idea of rewilding the planet, the whole, the world, with the notion that that's something we need. And maybe there's some people watching the recording of this, or maybe you're tuned in live and you don't jive with that, or you don't understand what I'm talking about. But basically this imperative that really, like, starting right now, we all need to be working towards a healthy, regenerated future, regenerating the biosphere, regenerating natural systems, regenerating our food systems, regenerating our own bodies, regenerating our houses, so that we can all live a thriving future rather than the sort of darker, resource scarcity, declining populations of everything that seems to be the direction we're kind of going. This is sort of the opposite, and permaculture is one of those key things. Survival skills is one of those things. Cultural regeneration, and a whole ancestral skills, like whatever you want to. There's a lot of different ways to work with that. Actual restoration, regeneration of ecosystems, all of these things. And Evelina and I think we met online about 2 months ago now in one of these free Fridays. And I got to find out about Wild Cooperative, and I got really excited because anytime I find people who are kind of doing what I'm describing in different places in the world, and they're connecting with the land, and they're working with permaculture, and they're building community. I just get really excited. So thanks for joining me today, Evelina. And I was wondering, could you just tell us a little bit about Wild Cooperative, where you live, and what's going on there?
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Nate. Let me just move a little because my partner's talking on the phone. So part of being off grid is having a landline.
Yeah, no worries. I totally
to
understand.
communicate. And
yeah,
we don't want to get battery, so we have a corded phone. I don't know if anybody remembers those, but so I'm gonna move with my laptop. So we got here to Western Colorado about 8 years ago at this point. And we were kind of just traveling all around the United States looking for land. And we had two priorities. My partner wanted live water on the land, and I wanted to be close to a forest, close to some wilderness. So we ended up here. But yeah, it wasn't the first place we looked at. So there are places out there, but definitely access to land is challenging at this point. And I think it's getting worse and worse with the prices rising. But yeah, we got here and it was raw land. And it was really beautiful. It was part of a ranch in this gorgeous valley that ends, like I mentioned, with the wilderness area. And we wanted to create something. We knew it wasn't just for us. We knew we wanted to have a community around us, not to just share the responsibilities, but to share the fruits of our labor. And I would say that we wanted to. We're lucky to have the design kind of establish itself for us. There's a part of a land that is beautiful and pretty inaccessible. It's pretty steep and gorgeous wilderness. There's lots of wildlife there, and we decided that this is going to be a part of the land that we're stewarding here for everything that we cherish, that makes the community grow and makes the ecosystem balanced. But yeah, just to kind of back up, we created this community, which is a land sharing community that stewards this 16 acres in Smith Fork Valley in Western Colorado. And we have an education site and then a demonstration site for regenerative living skills. We run workshops in the summer. And they could be anything from nonviolent communication classes to natural building to foraging and making medicine and nutritious foods from local plants. So it's just a little bit about us.
That's awesome, Evelina, and thank you. I mean, like when I hear the idea, the vision, the image of where you live, it definitely is one of those things that starts to give me hope. It's like, we need these stories that are giving us hope, as opposed to it's important for us to be informed of world events, but the challenge of so much intensity that's out there. So I would love to hear, because if I understand correctly, having just from our few little conversations and then just, researching about Wild Cooperative and stuff, it's not like you started in this field, right? Like this was something that you discovered along the way, right? Like this became an important enough part of your life that you basically designed your life around this. I would love to hear a little bit about your journey towards like why and how in your life did it become important to go be back on the land, teach regenerative living and skills, to like create an education center, to create a relationship for people in the land to explore these things. Can you say a little bit about that?
I can. So this is just my personal story, of course. Other community members have their own. But I would say I rediscovered this type of life. I think, maybe it wasn't present um, in such a scale when in my childhood, but I grew up in Poland, in a big city, a million people city. But I don't know, European cities are a little different. And, it was, I grew up in the 80s, post-communist, Poland, where people were still gathering together to support each other. They didn't rely on the government because the government was, not very friendly to the individuals, to the people. Um, and and I grew up not knowing any of this, as a child, but I had a sense of that kind of community. My mom would give me some change, and I would go to a neighbor because they had a greenhouse, and I would get some lettuce from them, and somebody else was selling eggs down the road, and so yeah, it's just I took it for granted. I just thought every city is like that. And then I moved to New York City in my 20s, and it was a jarring experience. It definitely rubbed off on me, that anxiety and kind of just hustle and bustle of um I don't know, what I now describe kind of meaningless tasks. But yeah, I would occupy myself not to think about, just kind of lack of satisfaction, lack of fulfillment. And I just saw everybody else doing it around me, and I thought that was normal. But there were inklings of it in my life that, I just wasn't fully happy. This wasn't really what I wanted to do with my life, and um, yeah, make a difference. That always kind of in the back of my head. But I finished a forensic science program in New York City, and I got a job right away in the field. I was a DNA analyst for criminal justice system within the criminal justice system, and kind of prided myself on objectivism of science, and and like, I don't know, case by case, it kind of, my eyes were opening to maybe futility of, I'm really not solving any problems. I'm not, societal problems. I'm not contributing to health of the culture and, people in need. Um, I'm not really giving even closure to somebody at like a basic level, with solving some of the cases, some of the crimes that were happening. And you're seeing the worst of humans, unfortunately. And it was just challenging. My respite was to go up to the mountains every weekend and go climbing, hiking, kayaking, anything I could do just to kind of take my mind off of my daily life. And at some point, I just thought maybe if I change my field a little bit and kind of just go from a laboratory to crime scene analysis field setting, and maybe I would have a little bit more say of how the analysis goes. And it was very eye-opening. It was probably the most important thing that happened in my career, is that I was getting disillusioned even more. I didn't think any of that was helping. And I got I started listening to a lot of restorative justice programs, trying to think, how the social justice can actually progress in a healthy way, and how it could create a better culture that supports the people who need help, and it's on both sides, from the perpetrators to the victims. So and families of the victims. And it was hard. Colorado is definitely a restorative justice state. There's a lot of programs, and even, sheriff's offices are involved in it, and for smaller crimes, and there's a lot of conferences. But it just wasn't still something that I felt like the system felt so large that I felt so small in it. I felt powerless. So I kind of just, was thinking like, what can I do? that will be meaningful to me, and it will feel like I'm accomplishing something. And that's when my partner and I started looking for land, and thought that if we create a community and just, one person at a time with small connections from neighbors, we can maybe make a difference in our little circle. And we got here. Maybe not so simply and straightforward, but yeah, we're here finally.
Wow, that's a amazing story, Evelina, and I love that it started in Poland, post-war Poland, and with the aspects of Europe. I've heard of these cultural threads in Europe from people before about the relationship with food and the land. That's just a different. It's like some elements of old world culture about, and even people. I don't know if this is in common in Poland, but other parts of Europe where people have like a summer cottage where they go to, and then they grow food, and they grow so much food that then they bring that back to the city. So even if they're very urban focused, they have some escape and a connection to land, even in that urban setting. And yeah, the threads of community that are there, and yeah, the journey from social justice to and criminal justice to now land and community building is quite powerful. And I think we can all, I certainly identify with elements of your story of feeling like, you can be trapped in this system, and that there's like you're trying to do something or trying to do something good, and that the system itself feels like it's so heavy and it's so intense, and it's difficult to make the change within. And how can we make the change now in other ways? And I'm imagining, just because of what I've heard from you in the past, and just what I know, that you chose your location for our interview here very deliberately. And I'm very intrigued with what's on the board behind you, and also what's on the shelves behind you. And I didn't know if you wanted to share anything about that. Do you want to share what's on the board, or have us do a little close up of what's on that board, and or share what's on some of those shelves and stuff beside you?
Sure. I mean, this is our community building, which was meant as a community building, and then life happened, and we're living in it. But eventually, yeah. So we have a little blackboard that we're using for kind of our tasks, and also we have our mission statement on top, which you can read on our website fully. But I mean, the gist of it is that we're trying to change our perspective from human-centric to biocentric. So kind of just go back to feeling and participating as a crucial integral part of our ecosystem, right? So not being isolated from it, not feeling ourselves separate or inferior or superior, to everything around us. So and then also, yeah, treating everything around us, no matter what form, as our family and relatives. So just having a little bit of that shift, going back to seeing ourselves not as unique, but as everything being part of us, and us being part of it. And then to our left, I do a lot of foraging, and you can find a bunch of herbs there, and fruits, local wild fruits and mushrooms, and yeah, lots of different things, some different flowers that I'm trying to experiment with, acorn, and curly dock, and what else do I have in there? But our neighbors around grow oats and wheat, so we do that, and our own grinding. And yeah, it's a full task of trying to figure out, where does your food come from? Can I have a relationship with it? Is this a crucial part of my life? Is it going to provide me the most amount of sustenance, by possibly having the least amount of impact on the ground, and kind of take care of the land that's given us all this life.
Nice, nice. So I'm imagining several of those jars come from the land, or things you hand foraged or harvested or traded for, or something like that. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Is that?
Yes.
No, that's so cool. I think that that's, when I see, it's so funny because when we see these things, when I talk about places like Wild Cooperative or, there's a person I know in Nepal who's trying to set up a similar, permaculture eco village ecotourist site actually. But I feel like we're also, in some ways we could be looking into the past. For some people it's like, oh, this is, and even elements of your background of growing up in Poland, being there. But also I see the future, like this is what I think the future looks like, is more of this, or I hope so. I think we need that, right? Like if we're gonna make that work, I think we need some of that. So yeah, thanks to those of you who are joining in. I see Leonard's here from Germany, and I'm imagining that is Mink that's actually on the call here too. Some good friends too. Yeah, like I have my own collection of jars. I had my first experience with dock flower this last year. We had an incredible season with dock. So like dock is one of those plants that I just like grow in my yard, and it drives people crazy, right? When I talk about rewilding my yard, everybody's like, why are these big leafed, weird flowered things growing all over Nate's yard? And I'm sure, like drives my neighbors a little bit crazy. But and I don't think we'd ever successfully harvested dock seeds until last year, where we had a very dry and very hot summer, especially the end of the summer. So unusual for us, probably more typical for your part of the country, Evelina. But we were able to harvest dock seeds for the first time, and it was surprisingly fast and a surprisingly large amount of flour we were able to get. And you can just grind the seed and the hull up all together, right? You can just throw it in a coffee grinder or a blender or whatever. So we had this pretty like hearty, nutritious. And then the other thing we had a lot of last summer, again, that like I let grow all over the place, that is a weed that's actually a medicinal plant, edible plant that's really important, is plantain seeds. So we harvested a bunch of plantain seeds, and so then I made a bread. I mean, and I didn't just put plain dock flour in there. Okay, it has some bitter quality. So if you're just gonna make dock bread, like have fun with that, but it's not, it's good for survival purposes, but not necessarily like a yummy treat. But mixing that in with your other flours, and then mixing in the plantain seeds, is very hearty bread that we were able to make, that for my son and my wife and I here, and we live in like, I know people hear me tell stories of like, oh, there's salmon in the river over there, and then there was an elk over there, and I saw a mink over there, and there's ospreys, but like we live in town, like there's like, several hundred people in town, and like there's a major highway, a relatively majorish highway that way, and so we're only like 40 miles from Seattle. But just what we can find in our own yard, I think, is sometimes really empowering for people. So, well, I know we're going to be talking in a couple minutes about some of the classes that we're going to be doing out at Wild Cooperative. But I am curious. Of one thing I was going to ask is, did you and your husband does, or your partner does natural building? Is that correct? That's part of the vision of, or that's part of what happens at Wild Cooperative, some of this natural building work?
Yes, we do. I mean, we're definitely trying, especially with the cost of building materials. It's definitely something that we have been trying and doing. Masonry heaters. He's working on this certification and having a lot of interest in that, and having beautiful, efficient wood stoves. And yeah, no, we definitely, that's part of our education and demonstration side, of sharing our successes and our creative failures. But yeah, we're definitely experimenting in natural building. Yes, requires a lot of work. So you're kind of trading off, some convenience of manufactured products to it takes a lot of hands to create a natural building.
Yeah. This is similar to people learning survival skills, and like having to like use a stone knife for a while, and then you put a steel knife in their hands, and they're like, oh, and there's just this huge change in perspective of how lucky we are that we have things like steel knives that are really easily accessible. Like it is a big deal. And then and you all do some permaculture. Permaculture is part of the vision. Is that true? Is that part of the work that you all do, or part of the community there?
Yeah, yeah, like in a greater sense, definitely analysis of our site, kind of working with the environmental factors. And I have a permaculture certificate, design certificate, but and yeah, just kind of exploring indigenous ways and trying to connect with some elders that have lived here for a long time, um, and then yeah, just be open to asking questions and receiving those answers, because I think that's probably the biggest part of permaculture, just actually the analysis part, and
Yeah.
yeah, willing to work with nature, as opposed to kind of just enforcing your your ideas of how things should be.
Yeah, yeah. One of my favorite parts that I know about the permaculture process or approach is that whole notion of like spending a whole year on your land just watching what naturally happens before you start to do things to it. And obviously, not all of us have that luxury, but what a lovely idea and way of relating to the land is to really watch what the land itself does.
Yes, yes.
And I think it's so beautiful that you are all up against a wilderness area too. So it's sort of like you have the pure wild nature right there that's butting up against your place. Um, well, I want to see. Let me see if there's any questions. People can either ask some questions in the chat, or yeah, if you want to ask a question directly to Evelina, let me know. You can type it in the chat, or I can put you on audio, or even bring you on the screen. For those of you who are here, and then yeah, in a couple minutes here, we'll talk a little bit about the classes that are going to be coming up, because Wild Cooperative has starting to put together your summer schedule, right? So,
Yes.
and your spring schedule. So, um, yeah, feel free to type some questions into the chat, or raise your hand, or however you want to join us. Oh, great. And yeah, let's make sure we'll add this to the whole site actually. Here is some information, more information about Wild Cooperative right here, so everybody can see it. Yeah, what kinds of things are on the agenda for this summer and into the fall, fall, and summer out at Wild Cooperative? Hey, I know you're putting together your schedule. You have a few things.
Yes, we have 3 classes scheduled, or 3 weekends scheduled, more or less, right now. And yeah, today this year's going to be somewhat of a different year for us, a little strange year for us. We're trying to, in this world where water is purchased, we're trying to purchase some additional irrigation water rights. So we're actually have a court trial coming up in the summer. But so we're trying to somewhat take it easy with some of the things going on the land. But yes, we have a wonderful weekend with you on wilderness awareness and kind of rewilding our lives, and you can say more about it. But we also have a wonderful class with a local herbalist, clinical herbalist, and a biologist, trained biologist on gut health. So local plants for gut health, and we're going to do some fermentation and plant identification of simple plants that grow everywhere, from urban areas to your wilderness, to your forests. And we're going to do some medicine making as well. And then later in the summer, we're going to have a whole weekend on nonviolent communication training with our dear friend from New Mexico that's been coming up. This is his 4th year coming up, and he's a great elder teacher of nonviolent communication, certified with Marshall Rosenberg. So we're super excited to have that again available for our community.
Awesome.
When I
That's a
say a
fun.
community, it's a greater community of the Norfolk Valley and the adjacent areas.
Yeah, yeah. So you have folks that are local around you, right? That are part of this. But then I think when some of our conversations, you said that there's sometimes folks even that will come from Denver out to check out what's going on and have a weekend away and connect with some of the things that are happening, huh?
They do. And yeah, like as you know, with the scarcity of in-person workshops for the last 2 years, I mean, we had people coming from East Coast, and
Wow.
just to have the opportunity of be able to communicate, like we were mentioning in the beginning, with the challenges of everything that's happening around us, and the kind of escalation of this conflicts, and kind of people being in fear, and energies kind of rising, and for good or bad. We're just, I think people are searching for ways to communicate, and the nonviolent communication provides one of the really great models.
Yeah, yeah, a good resource. If there's ever a time that we could all use some nonviolent communication training, it seems to be right now because it's definitely not the norm at all anymore. Um, yeah, well, I wanted to share a little bit about what I'm hoping to bring out to Wild Cooperative. So first of all, I'm hoping that this can be a place where I can come back to repeatedly. And my wife, my partner, and I, and our son, we pre-pandemic, pre-COVID world, part of our vision of our way of rewilding our lives and rewilding the planet, and bringing our gifts to the world really was to travel at least somewhat to some places and share what we had to offer. And this include movement practices. This included survival skills, ancestral skills, and Mink is on this call. I was one of the places we went up to was BC, and did a training with Soaring Eagle School up there, and it was awesome. And we have gone to Hawaii and Texas, and so there's been a few places, and so there's this idea, this hope of having a few places in relationship that we can go to over time and develop relationship, and connect and share in those communities and learn and grow from those places as well. And it's part of that larger hope that we could have these sort of spots around the world that kind of serve as these models of what the world could look like going forward, and these rewilded places, these regenerated places, these refugia. And yeah, I am excited that the first weekend we've kind of put together, Evelina and I have talked about what we might work for the audience in Wild Cooperative that we're trying out is a full day on survival skills, like a really distilled survival skills immersion. Like, what are the essential things you need to know for backpackers, hikers, people who like to go camping, but also just like giving you some of the principles that can apply to your own home and life. So that's the first day. And then the second day, which is, I think, right in line with some of the things that Evelyn has talked about, is this notion of having a relationship with the plant world and looking at plant allies. And I wanted to, I've for years been developing this curriculum around basically what I call a green first aid. Like, how can you actually use plants if you are in a wilderness setting, or you're remote, or you don't have easy access to the drugstore or whatever? What are the plants, what are the medicines you can use to treat simple things, not like super complex, like you need to go to the emergency room and the responses you need to be medically evacuated, but how can we situate things if we're lost in the woods, or if we don't have access to a vehicle or whatever, to treat common instances. So this sort of and to realize that once upon a time we didn't have hospitals, we didn't have pharmacies, that we had to treat those things ourselves. So what does that green pharmacy, that green first aid look like? So that's what we have planned out there. I'm going to put a little link in the chat where you can find out more about that. For the next week or so, we got an early bird special going for people. I'm going to just read this. There's a little question from Matt in the chat. Yeah, this recording will be, or this webinar will be recorded Matt, and that's awesome. Who has a friend has some land down there, and you can share what's going on. And yeah, I'm glad to hear that this is inspiring and reconnective for you, because that's the whole point, right? Is no matter where we are, suburban, urban, country, wilderness, nature, wherever it is, that we can find those ways to reconnect. And yeah, and then down the road, if we are able to do in-person trainings and workshops, my wife and I would love to do a natural movement weekend out there, and then just kind of continue this series of like these ideas of rewilding our lives. Like, how can we actually do that? And so that's kind of that's the plan. And if people were interested, we could do more on survival skills. We could do like a fire focused day, really working on the skill of fire. We could do a whole survival weekend. We could do a food weekend. I know you've got a lot of foraging skill, Evelina. It sounds like that's something you guys have people coming in relatively regularly. But like cooking over a fire, like a lot of people, like suddenly there's this big gap if they can't access their kitchen. Like, so what? How do we process and cook some of that stuff over a fire? Well, great. Well, any other questions or comments out there from all of you who are tuning in? And again, thanks for joining us, either live or recorded. Well, feel free to put any last comments or questions in the chat. And then, Evelina, yeah, is there anything else you wanted to share with everybody about this talk and anything? And I wanted to invite you to come back. It could be next week or the week, 2 weeks from today, to talk a little bit more about the water rights and the water issues, because I think that's a pretty big deal. And I find that very interesting, and it's just coming to the bigger issues of what we're talking about with the planet and people and land. Like, I'd love to have another time having a conversation about that. Would you be up for that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Water in the West is a hot topic. Yeah, people say whiskey is for drinking and water is for arguing. So a lot of people say that here, at least. But yeah, I mean, we'd definitely love to highlight what we know about the water and the water situation here in Colorado. Yeah. And thank you. And I just wanted to say, that we're also having a great community evening on Friday, hopefully by the campfire, and to share some stories and hear from you about your stories and about your journey, about the books you've written. And yeah, we're very excited about having that opportunity for our community to meet you.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and yeah, fingers crossed everything's gonna work out, and I can't wait to see the land. And yeah, I have this, like, when I hear about places with wild cooperative, I want to move there. I'm like, oh, let's just we could sell our house and we could go be there, and like everything you described, it's like, speaks to my heart. So well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. And Evelina, thank you for your time and energy around this. And yeah, we can connect again, whether we're going to do this next week or in a couple weeks, to do a follow-up and talk more about water, because it's such an important issue. And yeah, don't worry, everybody, a recording about this will go out to my list. And yeah, thanks again, Evelina. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nate.